Yesterday, author Jamie Attenberg tweeted the following. They're having a really good sale at Lowe's right now on spring plants, and while I was shopping today, a man in his 40s was eyeing the plants for a while until he shook his head wistfully and said, "No room at the inn," and walked away. That man in his 40s was Caroline Golum. We welcome her to teach us about houseplant care.
Hi,
Welcome.
MacKenzie.
Look at this beautiful array of plants that you brought.
This isn't even the half of it.
Do these normally live in your house?
They do. They only live in my house because, like many New Yorkers, I don't have an outdoor space with which to cultivate a garden. So I have to do my gardening indoors. And today I brought plants that are kind of like smaller things that I put on end tables or set next to tchotchkes in a tasteful fashion. One, because they're easier to transport in my Subaru. And two, because they're kind of an interesting array of plants that require different levels of care, different levels of light, things like that.
How lovely. And this is very important because we all need help. I speak for myself and Isabel. So talk to me about, can we say your favorite? Is that asking you to pick your favorite child? Do you have a favorite?
I do have a favorite, sort of. My favorite plant, probably because it's the most dramatic of the ones here, is the Monstera. Monsteras are becoming like a very hot plant right now.
I've seen a lot of tattoos of Monstera leaves.
Yes, the iconic split-leaf philodendron, as it's also known, or Swiss cheese plant. These little cuts and holes in here come from how much light they get. And the more mature they get, the more mature they get, the more kind of holes that they get.
So what does this say about your plant that it doesn't have that many perforations? How much light has it been getting?
It probably hasn't been getting a whole lot. These ones are in a window, but they're not like in the window. They're like set a little bit back because some plants, if you put them too close to the window, they scorch, and that's no bueno. You got to be mindful of that. But
window adjacent.
Window adjacent. They like to be a little bit further back. They like some soft light that changes throughout the day.
Talk to me about some of these spider babies that you've brought.
Yeah, I brought a couple. Spider baby is an amazing plant. Again, if you want a lot of look in your home for not a lot of effort. Spider plants grow. They're kind of like these big bushy Dr. Seuss looking ones. And then if you see here, they start to have babies.
How are spider babies made?
Through another spider plant. They'll push up these vines that kind of come out from underneath, and the vines will hang over the side, and they create kind of like a carousel look. It looks, or like those guys that wear those beer can hats at stadium games.
Sure.
It's kind of that vibe.
Okay.
So they come off with these little vines, and they're really easy to harvest and propagate. They are amazing, cheap housewarming gifts and like giveaways and stuff. Again, minimal effort, maximum karma. All you have to do if you want to propagate them is you cut the vine off and then grab these little guys off of the vine. You get a kind of a bundle, and you'll see here they've got these little nubs, and you just put them in water, comme ça, and then they start to root. And actually, I have over here, so this is a spider plant. It looks a little bit like a scallion. I don't know if they're in the same family because I'm not a scientist. The way that spider plants grow in the wild, because all plants have kind of a wild antecedent, so they'll grow the vines, the little babies, and then the babies will like fall to the ground, and then they'll stay on the vine.
And then they'll like scurry away.
Yeah, and then if you feed them after midnight, no, they come off the vine and then they sit on the ground, and then once they're in the soil, they take root that way. I like to root them in water just because it's quicker, and again, it's kind of nice to have a thing that exists in the liminal space between life and death, suspended in liquid on your desk.
Plant zombies. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a fungus growing in the soil of my wandering Jew right now. And I just feel like I never know how much water my plants want. How do I know? Teach me.
How do you know? Two things. One, if you've got a fungus growing in there, repot that plant.
Okay.
Get that soil out of there. Get some fresh soil. Hold off on watering. It'll look a little droopy, but it'll thank you later. And then how often to water your plants. Different plants have different water requirements. So my wandering Jew, this is a cutting that I also took from home. I have one hanging in a nice, bright, sunny spot, but they do well in low light too. You kind of just have to do the finger test or the chopstick test. Like some plants, if they're still wet down at the bottom, you don't want to add more moisture to it because then the roots can get waterlogged and then they get root rot and then they die.
I just learned about the chopstick test.
Yeah.
So please, if our viewers have not heard of it.
Chopstick test is fun and easy. You just take a chopstick and you jam it down pretty much to the bottom of your planter, and you pull it up, and it's like if you're testing a cake out of the oven. If it comes up with soil stuck to it, it means that soil is wet. The plant hasn't dried out yet. If it's a plant that needs to dry out between waterings, like a cactus or pilea or an oxalis or something like that, then you want it to dry out and you want to make sure that there's no water there. Some, you want the top maybe like 25 to 30% of the soil to dry out. It really depends. Anyone can be like a kind of homebrew expert on plants. You just have to be willing to like swap knowledge with people and Google things and have a curiosity. The thing to be mindful of, and I've made this mistake a bunch of times, I know a lot of other people have, is overwatering. We all want to be caring and nurturing plant people because we can't own homes or afford to have children or dogs, but it's hard to know when you're watering your plant too much or when you're caring too much.
So it's actually like we could be the helicopter parent.
Absolutely.
And doing damage to our children instead of helping them.
Helicopter plant parenting is a real problem, and thank you for helping me to raise awareness. I'm really adamant about this. Like, people just panic and they water their plants because they think they look weird, and like, just when in doubt, dry them out. Worst case scenario is it dies, you throw it out, you get another plant.
This is why plants are better than pets for people who maybe aren't ready to take that step, because you can just throw them out.
Yeah.
You can't throw your dog out. We have some questions from our viewers.
Okay.
And by viewers, I mean people who work on the show. Isabel would like to know how to deal with her fungus gnat problem. Wow, we're revealing a lot on the show.
Look, fungus lives among us, and there's not a whole lot that we can do about it. But again, if you find that the soil that you're keeping your plant in is like overwhelmingly overrun with funguses and gnats, swap out the soil. I also like to put stones at the top. So like, you have the top layer of soil, you put a bunch of stones on top of there, and then if it's a high humidity plant, for instance, a plant that likes a lot of humidity but maybe you don't want to water it too much, you can water the stones, and that humidity will like give the plant kind of a nice refresh. So that'll keep the gnats from coming up to the surface. I have an aloe vera plant that I've had for probably 6 years. I got it at a deli from a friend of mine. It was a gift. Bodega plants, by the way, some of the hardiest plants I've ever encountered.
The things they've seen.
So the aloe vera got too much water and a mushroom started growing out of it. And I got really weirded out by it. I was like, oh, what's this toxic thing? Like, am I going to die? What's going to happen to the plant? So sometimes these things look like crises because you're like, oh, this is a living thing in my care, and I've imbued so much of my neuroses into these plants in my life. But they have a lot to teach us, and if you just observe and like pay attention, what they like most of all is consistency. They like consistent care, they like consistent light, and pretty much all they need to live is light and water. So if you find the right balance of those two elements, then they'll thrive and they'll reward you.
All right, some more questions, some more viewer questions. All right, I know that these are all house plants, but what would you recommend for an outdoor space that is dark, has bad drainage, and is inhabited by a dog that likes plants but doesn't respect them?
I'd recommend a fake plant. Or if it's dark, I mean, you could do a fern. Like a Boston fern is a really popular low light plant. They need a lot of humidity. They don't like too much light. New York is really humid in the summer. Another good option, they have like different shrubs and bushes and stuff that you can get. I mean, I wish I had a better answer for you, but like I said, some astroturf and pink flamingos, that's what I would recommend if I had a backyard.
Always a good look.
I think the best thing about having houseplants, and part of why I'm so obsessed with doing it as a hobby, is one, it's good to have hobbies that don't include looking at your phone, because your phone is a prison. But also, it's an exercise in patience. Like, you're not going to get, a beautiful array of blooms and foliage right away. You can buy a plant like full size, but like, it'll change over time. And if you propagate things, if you prune them, if you rearrange and experiment with what kind of light requirements they need, you still have to wait a little while and observe. It's a very slow hobby. But I think, part of why plants are really popular right now, and a huge part of why I like them, is because they require you to slow down and observe and take time separate from whatever stressful thing you're doing to like keep track of things.
And maybe we'll close out with sort of the intersection of your hobby and phones being prisons, which is that there is a new genre of influencer who posts beautifully manicured photos of their plants. What do you think about these plant Instagram celebrities?
The plant-fluencers. If I had $1 for every time someone in my family sent me a lifestyle piece about a plant-fluencer and went, Caroline, you like plants. You could make this into your side hustle.
You do social media and you like plants.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm doing the anti-version of that by saying that if you are the kind of person that like thrives on the feedback of posting about your plants on social media, and I've done like Twitter threads about how to repot your plants and stuff.
I found them very informational and not at all vanity pieces.
Thank you. If that's your thing, like, sei gesund. Like, do whatever makes you happy. For me, it's less about like a public display and more about just like having nice things in your home and looking at them. I think a lot of people are intimidated by plant care because it's become like a very hot thing and because they want everything to look manicured and it just becomes another performative aspect of our lives. But it should be for you. Like, you should want to spend, 45 minutes out of your week rotating and watering and pruning all of these random things that don't talk to you and don't love you back because you like it, because you find it gratifying, because you like the way they look in your home, and because you like to give plant cuttings to your friends. Not because you're like, oh, my crush is going to love my thirsty plant post.
I like that. Hashtag thirsty plant post.
Hashtag thirsty plant post.
I think that's a really good point, that often for people in their 20s who may be living
or
in
30s,
living in their urban cities with, crushing student debt and 10 roommates, we're like, why can't we have nice things? And the answer is you can have nice things.
You can
Look at
absolutely.
this very accessible and beautiful Monstera.
Yeah, and plant care is nothing new. It's not like it's a trend that just started randomly because the New Yorker wrote about it. Very excellently, I should add. Plants have been a part of people's lives since the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and they became a more accessible thing for people to put in their home. Like in the years after the Industrial Revolution, the Victorian era was kind of like the first big trend time for indoor plants. The reason for that being that, like, then as now, people were crushed with debt. They worked too much. They lived in airless rooms or windowless rooms, and they wanted to have a nice kind of little middle-class thing to remind them of maybe the native land that they'd come over from, or their brief glimpse of the outdoors that they get at Central Park. So people have been imbuing their anxieties about their status and about who they are as people into their plants for like literally 100 and something years.
Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.